And we're back in the Kung Fu closet.
Back in the closet.
Back in the closet. So, hey, we got a new Threads account.
Do we?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, you can find us on Threads. KF Conversations, which is an offshoot of Instagram, so that wasn't too hard for me to set up. You can also find us on Instagram under KF Conversations. You can also find us on YouTube. Listen to our show on all of your, what do we do? Podcast channels? Absolutely.
Yeah, all your chosen podcast channels.
Our email is kungfuconversations@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook under Kung Fu Conversations. You can also find us on Teespring under Kung Fu Conversations, which I found out now is basically, if you go to www.kungfuconversationspodcast.com or look through it through Teespring, you can find us there too. We are also on Buy Me a Coffee under Kung Fu Con Pod.
Nice.
That is Kung Fu Con Pod, not to be confused with General Zod, because it's kind of got that flow, or maybe one of Captain Kirk's villains, Kung Fu Con Pod. And what is your school name, my friend?
My school's called Boulder Internal Arts. We do Bagua and Shingi.
And you can find a fantastic blog spot that you have.
That's the best way to get a hold of me.
Yeah, Boulder Internal Arts blog spot.
And yours?
Red Force Chinese Boxing. You can find me on YouTube and Instagram. And I will be teaching a big seminar here, so we're going to plug this. Actually, you know what's funny? By the time this comes out, the seminar will be over. So I hope to see you guys, though. That'll be all right. The 22nd and 23rd, I will be down teaching at Denver 5280 Shaolin. And if you guys can make it down, we'd love to see you. I'm doing a 2-day introduction to the Wong Q method of Wing Chun. And half the proceeds go to the school for the Denver Chinese National Kung Fu Championship. Mm-hmm. Now, I should plug this because I do another one in January or February. So I do it twice a year. So I'd love to see everybody. And then the price is only $45 for 2 days.
That's cheap. You get such good instruction.
And so thank you, my friend. And so it's $25 for one. Or if you show up with a Kung Fu Conversations t-shirt on,
boom,
it's $25 for both days.
There you go.
All right, my friend.
So what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about how much is too much in cross-training in martial arts. And I have to do a shout out to my good friend Kenneth Knight of the Casper Dojo up in Wyoming. Kenneth Knight actually tackled this topic almost 6 months ago. I mentioned it to him, and he's like, man, that sounds like a good topic. I'm like, well, take it and run with it, because we're all going to have different opinions on it. Mm-hmm. You know, we all train different things and whatnot. And believe it or not, it was so funny because he's like, you know, I think since you cross-train in the Chinese arts, they might be a little more applicable than something like Kenneth does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He does Eskrima, and he does karate. A very traditional Okinawan style, but it's interesting. And he does kickboxing. I like Ken because he dabbles in a lot of stuff. But he's like, it sounds like the Chinese arts might be a little more, I don't know, mixable. And it's so funny because I'm like, tell me what planet these forms come from. So I sent him someone doing Sunim Tao. I sent him someone doing the single palm change. And I sent him someone doing Pichuan. And he's like, that doesn't even look like any of these come from the same planet. And those are the first forms in my 3 respective styles.
Right.
I mean, one of them is stationary and moves the arms. One of them, the feet move and the hands are fixed. And then the other one is a combination of all of it moving. Or if you want to count the mother form, which is Santi, that could definitely be looked at as the first form in Xingyi, a static form. So, I mean, it depends on if you're looking at it through Pichuan or Santi Sha. So it is so wild because Kung Fu is such a fascinating thing. Again, like Byron Jacobs says, it doesn't happen in a bubble. And so I'm going to start the show off on my opinion on when it's too much. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to throw a caveat out there right now. Are you talking about being too much as a practitioner in cross-training? Or are you talking about as a coach, a sifu, a sensei, or a teacher? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to start with the practitioner, and here it is. When you have to think about what you're doing in the skill to apply it for free randori or sparring. I think when it becomes too much as a practitioner, that you actually have to stop and think about what you're doing. Now, I understand that as a rookie, that's going to have to be a part of the learning curve. But to have it in your martial repertoire for either sparring or like again, like a free randori style, like even a downgraded style of sparring. It's like, okay, you want to do the Kali empty-handed drills, okay? So you're only stuck with Kali. Go. That's the only thing you can use with your empty-handed. And entries, setups, joint locks, throws. Just Kali strikes. If I've only been at Kali for a year, and I have to think, what? Then I think it's not accessible to you. When you actually have to go to the duh moment, then it's not in your nervous system enough. And so you either have to really delve down into training it in different ways and spend more time with it when it's not a part of your body, right? Because, I mean, if your brain doesn't recognize it, then your body's not going to, right? That's just got to be some kind of disconnect right there. And yeah, I think that's really where cross-training – now, you might be a rookie at it, and that might not be a fair assessment, right? But down the road, if you've done something for 2 or 3 years, you should have access to it. But if you don't, then there's something wrong. You either have too much that you're juggling around. You don't understand how to train them separately.
Sure.
Because for me, that's been the biggest aha moment for me. I'm not trying to do and shout out to Cold Stone. If you guys want to sponsor us, I'd be totally fine with that. I'm sure my stomach would. I'm not trying to do Cold Stone ice cream. I'm not taking cookies and cream ice cream and mixing it with gummy worms and marshmallows on the Cold Stone table, right? When I do Wing Chun, I do Wing Chun. I do a dynamic warm-up for 15 to 30 minutes. But then when you're training Wing Chun with me, or I'm doing Wing Chun, I am doing the Wong Q method of Wing Chun that I learned from my Sifu Mayor. When I do Xingyi, I do your Xingyi. When I do Bagua, I do your Bagua. And so inside my soul and my mind, if you will, I have a separate little shelf for each of the, and a little label on them, right? And I almost even have a different personality when I go into it and I do the training. Because I want different outcomes. I've got, I have a totally different outcome that I want when I'm doing a Xingyi application as opposed to when I'm doing something in Wing Chun. And so I think the mindset and the intention has to do with it as well. So unless you're investing the time and the effort to get the physical skill, to get the mental recognition, which is the body and the mind putting it together, and then the emotional content too, you have to train the hell out of this stuff. And it is really hard unless, I wonder too, maybe that's something that MMA really has, is a methodology to cross-train things, because they're not training the whole system. They're taking out specific pieces and methods. A little bit of boxing here. I don't worry about the stance so much. Just worry about the entry method with a cross and a jab, or really know how to refine your straight lead. And then Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, maybe that's your core. And then you don't have to know everything about judo, but you've got 5 really great throws. And so I wonder too, in the cross-training methodology, Wing Chun's always going to be my core. And then I've fallen deeply in love with Xingyi. And so that also, I'm going to try to make that core number 2. But Bagua is a supplemental art. And so maybe that's something else too when we start cross-training other arts, whether it be multiple styles of karate, whether it be multiple styles of Indonesian martial arts, Filipino stick fighting, or whatever. You have a solid foundation and a solid core with years' worth of training and understanding in that methodology. And that's always a good time to start seeing what else is out there. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do something that's a classical martial art. You might run into a self-defense method that really, floats your boat. Or maybe you go a little awkward and you're like, you know what? I kind of want to learn the Wudang sword. And so you go off and you train the Wudang sword, and you train it for health, enlightenment, if you will. And maybe you do it for competition. Maybe that's your competition. It's like when it's combat, it's 100% combat. But I want something kind of fun. And I've got nothing against that. But again, that's being honest with yourself and knowing your intention when you start to cross-train.
Yeah, for sure. I think, you could do Zumba.
Heck yeah. Just as good. Just as good. Shots fired. Shots fired. Good Lord.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about cross-training, then it's like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, if you extend it past the edges of the martial box, there's a lot of stuff out there.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what I was thinking of, when you were speaking about that before. And I was like, well, I agree with you. I think it's at least in my experience as a teacher, I've seen people try to train multiple arts that they were inexperienced in at the same time. And it just turns into a giant dumpster fire generally. It's just a kind of a bunch of scrambled eggs, because it's very difficult, I think, for your nervous system to really be precise and to be able to keep those things separate. And I think that's important. I think it's important to understand what each art is trying to teach you. And if you're going to invest the time and the effort, then you want to try to be clear about the footwork, about the body method, about the hitting method, about
power method.
Yeah, all of the things that art's trying to teach. But by the same token, it's like if you have a core art that you are good at, and you spend some time in, and you've gotten competent in, then yeah, sure, go check out other arts. Go see what excites you, see what interests you. And I think these days, especially because there's so much access.
Yes.
You can find somebody online. You can find somebody, I mean, there's so much martial arts out there these days that it's like
maybe 2 doors down from you.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just like, oh yeah, no, I think that's an interesting method. I want to go check that out. But I think the problem that I find that as a teacher, coming from the teacher's perspective, right?
Sure. Okay. Good transition.
Is that people, they have a core method, then they show up to my class and
they're trying to do the core method.
They're like, oh no, well, I already know that. They come in with an attitude of like, oh, well, I just want to learn this, or I want to learn that. And I've already done, 10 years of Shaolin, and I've done, well, that's cool. And I respect that. But I mean, to be frank, this isn't fucking Shaolin. This is not a Shaolin method. This is not what we're doing here. So, you kind of have to, they say, you have to empty your cup. You have to come and start over as a beginner. And I think more than anything, that's the thing that trips people up.
You know what? You just said something that sparked something in my head. Shout out to our good friend Sifu Alex Rifter, the Kung Fu Genius up there in New York.
Yeah, Kung Fu Genius.
Something that Alex said, he's like, one of the hardest people to teach for me is people that come from other Wing Chun lineages.
Oh, man.
Because they're trying to do their Wing Chun. It's like, listen, you're going to have to empty your cup. I could only imagine what it would be like if someone else had like 20 years of Bagua walking into your school and like, I want to learn your Bagua method. It's like, well, it's ground zero.
Yeah.
Square one.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think some other arts are a little bit more transferable. Mm-hmm. But I like something like a Xingyi or a Bagua or even a Wing Chun. It's fascinating too, because I'm working with a young person right now, and they've been in a lineage for 5 or 6 years, and they are allowed to teach in their lineage just like I'm allowed to teach under my Sifu. Mm-hmm. But they're coming to me to learn how to spar.
Right.
And it's like, didn't your Sifu teach you that? Didn't your Sifu teach you entry methods? Didn't your Sifu teach you how the sticking hands turns into transitional methods on when somebody gives you impact at contact? And it's just, all that is fascinating to me. It's like, I'm willing to work with you, but when we start doing this, one, I hope you tell where you got this from, and two, really practice it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's been transferable information for me in multiple different fields. Mm-hmm. And so when you're practicing this Wing Chun, it's going to be different than what you're used to. And you're going to have to put what you're used to on a shelf somewhere and go ahead and allow yourself to be a rookie from square one. Because if you keep contradicting me, you're not going to learn anything. And you're just going to tick me off, and I'll be like, there's the door.
Sure. Yeah.
Get on out. Because if you're not willing to learn, you came to me with a purpose, and I can teach you that. Mm-hmm. But you're going to have to be willing to hang it up. Now, as far as teaching goes, I will tell you, I've tried to do a couple of seminars in Xingyi, and it wasn't that they weren't getting it. It's just that they were wanting the power that I had the very first day.
Yeah.
And somebody's like, well, it feels like you're muscling it. And then I'm like, move my arm. And they're like, oh, well, there's no tension in your arm at all. And things like that. And they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, high level of coordination. High level of coordination. This took me years of training, hours a day. You're not going to get this on the first day. Mm-hmm. And the response was, well, your form is so simple. I'm like, simple doesn't mean easy. And that's something that I've heard from a lot of podcasts, not just martial, but in life as well. Simple is not easy.
Well said.
You know, this is a simple form with layers and layers and layers. It looks simple, but the complexity inside of it. If you have a proper teacher, they can show you the complexity of Pichuan, of a 3-move form that you can still practice for years and years and years and still get better at it.
Yeah.
And that to me is a true methodology, a true system, a true training practice. And that's what it comes down to is your cross training helping your overall practice? Do you have a practice? Do you look at what you train as a practice? Because a practice doesn't finish, as my dad used to say, until the day they throw dirt in your face.
Sure.
You know, there's the old saying about the 90-year-old violinist. I'm like, why do you practice? Because I still think I can get better.
Yeah, man. That's the thing, right? You know, I think that idea of improvement can come in a lot of ways, though. And like sometimes, at least in my practice, I found that like getting outside of my box, like I was joking earlier about the Zumba thing. Right?
Sure.
But that's kind of the idea. And you and I have sort of touched on this topic before, but having things that are like sort of that are outside of your martial box.
A movement practice.
Any kind of practice.
We joke about it a lot, but I'm telling you, dance.
Go read. Go do things that are totally outside of your normal purview that you can make into a practice or a discipline and then see if those things, as you cross train that with your martial arts, if it helps you. Maybe reading gives you the presence and focus.
Absolutely.
That it takes to read something and then comprehend what that thing is saying, whether it's fiction or not fiction or whatever. And maybe that improves your kung fu.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of things out there that we can look at and say, oh, well, you can cross train those things. And then there you go. All of a sudden you're going to get a sort of a tangential benefit.
I like that.
Outside of your martial practice. I think it all has to come down to, and I this is sort of as an adjunct to what I just said, meaning that, how do I say this? You still have to practice. You still have to have your practice, and then you can add things on from the outside. I know a lot of people who kind of practice, They dabble. They train. I mean, by my standards. And I'm sure I'm a fucking dabbler compared to other people who are out there right now. So
there's some people that do that for their full-time job, though.
Absolutely.
And if that's your full-time job, then you can't dabble. You've got to put in the hours of sweat.
Yeah, for sure. So I suppose in that way it's kind of relative, but you should be able to see the progress in somebody, whether that's yourself or whether you're a teacher looking at somebody else. You're going to see that the benefit maybe of that cross training, or for my example before, maybe you're reading too much. Maybe you need to get up and you need to go practice your art.
You're on the cerebral. Well, that's interesting too, because that could be a whole different show. But you break down your art into the cerebral, the physical and tangible, and then maybe even for me is always the spiritual. And maybe someday we'll talk a little bit about that. A little bit about the philosophies that we have and whatnot. But I have to be inside of my body and aware mentally of what my body is doing mentally and physically. And then that's where I find that spiritual nugget or that emotional or philosophical nugget, if you will. And so for me, I have to start through the body to find my practice. And then, after I've done even not a hard day of it, but maybe just an easy day, maybe just a 30-minute Shingi practice. Then I could sit down and my reading of whatever I'm trying to read or my taxes or whatever I'm doing, the mental side of it is so much more clear.
For sure. Yep, exactly.
What do you think about this one? Should we go on a little longer, my friend? I think that's a good stopping place.
That's good.
Yeah, let's come back to this one. This one we're going to finish off, but we're not done with this one. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about cross training. How much is too much?
How much is too much?